East Asia is the union of wonderful and exotic countries like China, Japan, North and South Korea, and Mongolia. When we think about these countries, there is a clear vision of their identity. We instantly recognize their food, culture, and people. There is a special aspect about them because if we look at Occidental cultures, they can be differentiable by a few characteristics like architecture or language, but in the big picture our culture is remarkably similar. Nonetheless, East Asia culture is far from equal to ours, and, more surprisingly, it has remained like that for centuries. Back then, we can understand why this happens. The exchange of cultures was limited. By the other hand, today there is no excuse. It is a globalized society that breaks apart individual cultures to build a larger and global culture. So how have they achieved such an accomplishment? Well, through an ideology called nationalism. Nationalism emerged in East Asia as a result of the influx of Western-derived political thought in the 19th century, but its formation drew heavily on pre-existing notions of identity. Quote by Ranometer from her paper Nationalism in East Asia. China, for example, regardless they had a tough time pushing back foreigners, the government's nationalist politics to resist the process of globalization, thus showing power and independence. Despite their efforts to preserve identity, their own nationalistic cultures were the ones that made people get interested, and with time, they also entered this globalized world while preserving their ideals but opening their market, along with coexisting with the continuous change the world is bringing and taking advantage of it. We should be thankful because without them many inventions would have never reached the whole world if they kept their own interest as a priority. There is a huge list of products patented in East Asia, including DVDs, calculators, compasses, or electronic cigarettes, which are the main topic of this video. The first documented reference to an electronic cigarette is a patent granted to Joseph Robinson in 1930, filed in 1927. Nonetheless, a prototype was never tested and thus never produced commercially. In 1967, the first smokeless, non-tobacco cigarette device was patented by Herbert A. Gilbert in Pennsylvania, a device that produced heated, moist and flavored air. Though Herbert was never successful with his patent, during the 90s many prototypes relied on evaporation or physical propulsion, but a few were fairly similar to modern e-cigarettes. But the world had to wait until 2004 when Hun Lik, a 52-year-old pharmacist, inventor and smoker, introduced e-cigarettes to the Chinese market. He later changed his company name to Ruyan, which in Chinese means almost like smoke. After the success of e-cigarette sales in Asia, products were sold through the internet in large quantities. E-cigarettes gained popularity in many different countries. In April 2006, electronic cigarettes were introduced to Europe by Greg Carson, who is attributed to be the first to westernize the e-cig product, relabeled as the Electrofag. The product gained such popularity in the UK and Europe that British Parliament passed legislation legalizing the use of e-cigs indoors and in other places that traditional smoking has become banned. In 2007, e-cigarettes were introduced to the American market. However, in 2008 the electronic cigarettes would have their first big obstacle. The World Health Organization proclaims that it does not consider the electronic cigarette to be a legitimate smoking cessation aid and demands that marketers immediately remove from their materials any suggestions that the WHO considers electronic cigarettes safe and effective. Despite those claims, research has proved the World Health Organization wrong when Health New Zealand conducted a detailed quantitative analysis and concluded that carcinogens and toxicants are present only below harmful levels. On the basis of the findings, the e-cigarette is rated several orders of magnitude 100 to 1,000 times less dangerous than smoking tobacco cigarettes. But on the other side of the world, things were getting complicated for electronic cigarettes in the United States. The FDA added electronic cigarettes to Import Alert 66-41 and directs the U.S. Customs and Border Protection to reject the entry of electronic cigarettes into the United States on the basis of them being unapproved drug delivery devices. Turkey's health ministry suspended the sale of e-cigarettes. Health Ministry Drugs and Pharmacy Director, Mahmut Tokas, claimed electronic cigarettes are just as harmful as regular cigarettes. Also, Australia banned the possession and sale of electronic cigarettes, which contain nicotine, citing that every form of nicotine except for replacement therapies and cigarettes are classified as a form of poison. Nowadays the debate continues whether electronic cigarettes are harmful in different ways than regular cigars. Nonetheless, there is no question that this product is now the most used tobacco product among youth, surpassing conventional cigarettes. Therefore, the Tobacco Vapor Electronic Cigarette Association, whose aim is to speak on behalf of the electronic cigarette industry, especially in response to health concerns, and to help institute industry standards. Meaning that this peculiar globalization is a demonstration of how culture can be influenced and changed due to a product, Chinese society making use of tobacco that is originally from Cuba and changed into a cigarette from Spain and used by all people around the world, consumed and produced by China, and now this changing it into healthier and recreative usage. Everything is interconnected and globalization has made us aware of this, and being able to reproduce, manufacture and even have products that aren't naturally from our land. Also, it shows us how tendencies spread in an open and closing of an eye, and it's almost impossible to keep up with this process that changes every second.